Good morning, Prince William County. My name is Nancye Lynn Sadler. If you call me Nancy, I'm not going to know who you're speaking to, so please call me Lynn. I came today to speak about some of the things that are very concerning in our community that have been transpiring here, not for just a short period of time, but over the transition of years that I've lived here in Prince William County. I've been a lifetime resident here. I was born at Prince William Hospital. My family moved here in 1954, long before I came along. They've been landowners, business owners, and community servants in various capacities, contributing to the wealth and success of our community as a whole. For the majority of my adult life, I have been a public servant. For the last 30 years, I've been a registered nurse. For the last 24 years, I've been a family nurse practitioner and have served in different capacities over the past 30 years. I feel like I have a very good understanding for the community in which we live. I feel like I understand the poor, the rich, the in-between, the needs, the deficits, and I feel like my finger is definitely on the pulse for what is transpiring in our community. Over the last 6 years, I came to bring about the Manassas Addiction Center and Sadler Family Practice. I just want to come to tell you about how both of those came to be. The Manassas Addiction Center came about when we were seeing an increased rise in heroin use. This is before fentanyl had ever even been introduced to our community. We recognized that there was a need for treatment that was not being provided. You could get services, but you had to pay cash for them. The folks who had Medicaid or even privately insured policies could not attain medical services for addiction treatment. So I considered, if you had diabetes and you were unable to access medical treatment, how unbelievable would that be? And the same goes for addiction. If you can't access treatment for a medically covered medical problem, it's just absurd to me. So we came to the table prepared to serve the poorest of poor and the sickest of sick in our community. We were the first program to deliver insurance-covered medication-assisted treatment services in our community. About 2 years into, well, let me back up for just a second. We primarily were focused on addiction treatment, but as we realized that the addiction wasn't an isolated medical problem, we realized that there were family practice needs and psychiatric needs that were not being met. We tried to refer our addiction patients to other practices locally, and our patients were turned away. We were told they didn't want those types of people in their practice. So I opened the Sadler Family Practice, and we are a now multifunctional platform. We provide family care, we provide addiction services, we have a psychiatric board certified provider, and 2 therapists that work in our practice. So we treat the whole person. We don't just treat one aspect of it, and we have been very successful in delivering care in our community, providing these services. About 2 years into treatment, we started to see children showing up on our doorstep needing treatment. As to date, I believe we are the only private facility that is treating children on an outpatient medication-assisted treatment basis. I think some of the counties have some community service board programs that are very small and addressing some of the needs for some of the patients. But to this date, I think that we are probably the only all-inclusive adolescent drug treatment program that's available in Virginia. I think there are some private inpatient facilities, but there are no facilities that are taking Medicaid patients inpatient for drug treatment unless there's a primary psychiatric disorder, which means they have to be suicidal or homicidal or in an acute psychosis in order to get an inpatient treatment. What that basically means is that these folks are very sick and of high need and very dangerous situations that often involve adults who have perpetrated horrible crimes against these kids in the procurement and placement of drugs in our community, utilizing them as weapons to move drugs and to service their needs as people who are selling and moving these drugs around. So I just wanted to touch base on what I do in this community and what I brought to the table. I would like to bring one more really important piece of information to you as well. And this speaks to my credibility. I don't think that you're going to find another private individual, and when I say private, meaning solely funded by myself, who has delivered more free services out of my own pocket to this community than I have. I think you're going to have to look pretty far and wide to find someone who has contributed as much as I have, not just in free services to citizens, but in attending meetings and county boards and on committees and helping develop treatment protocols and outsourcing of materials so that our community can be informed about what's transpiring and what the actual risks are for their children and adults in our community. We have delivered pretty close to almost $1 million in free services. So I think that when I come to speak today, I come from a position of having very clean hands. I come altruistic, and I come with a caring heart about what the condition is of our citizens who find themselves in the hands of our local community prosecutors' jurisdiction. And I think that's something that's become terrifying. Just want to talk about some of the things that have happened over the course of the 50-year Democratic rule here in Prince William County. Because before Amy Ashworth was Paul Ebert, another Democrat. I know the Democrats are very popular in this area. A lot of people feel like voting Democrat helps them socially, but it was just a very few short years ago that the Spanish people, within the last 5 years, if you looked Spanish, the police could pull you over and make you prove your residency here or detain you until you could prove that you had legal papers here allowing you to be in the United States. Can you imagine what it would take for a police officer to look at your skin color, decide that you're brown enough that they're going to pull you over and hold you to prove that you legally came here to our country? Now, let's just explain a little bit of this. One of the very significant things of legal immigration, and I do happen to know a little bit about this because I worked for a facility where we did immigration physicals and such, is that immigration costs upwards of about $20,000. So not only did you pay an exorbitant amount to come to our country, now you're being railroaded at the hands of the people who wrote the laws here in our county. So it may not have been Amy Ashworth's hand that wrote that law, but it was certainly under Paul Ebert's jurisdiction that this was enforced. People were held and detained based on the color of their skin and suspecting that they might not be a legal immigrant. Amy Ashworth is a common copy of Paul Ebert. On her website, it said very clearly that she had every intention of following through on the same type of platform that Paul Ebert ran. I serve the Spanish community. I have a lot of very good friends who immigrated here legally and illegally. And I will say that the folks that come here to our country come for a reason that's not to inflict malice to Americans or to people who were born here or people who came here legally. It's because they're trying to escape something so horrible that most of us have never even comprehended that things like this exist in other countries, where their children are being prostituted, their family members are at risk of being shot outside their houses, their children and their loved ones are starving, there's no medical care. These are not reasons that people come to America because they want to hurt our culture. It's because they're dying in other countries. Like, we have to understand that it's not a bad position that people want to inflict on the United States or not to be a cog in the wheel. They definitely want to do that. one of the most interesting things that I have come to learn is that even people with a worker's permit here, they're allowed to work. They take their tax money from them, but they're not eligible for a refund. So they pay more than what we pay as American citizens here, or legal residences, and they don't have the opportunity to claim any of their deductions back at the end of the year. But that's all I'm going to say about that. I think that when it comes time to vote, I think that you need to recognize that the hand you hold is the one that's holding you down. As a minority, as someone who is at risk in this community, I think you need to understand that these people are not here to help you. They're here to hurt you. Most of us have a story to tell about a personal experience that they've had either with law enforcement or with the judicial system. I do happen to have a loved one with severe mental health issues that is suffering at the hands of Prince William County under the direction of the office of Amy Ashworth, specifically Garrett Jagtiani. Garrett Jagtiani is a senior Commonwealth attorney here at Prince William County, and he has lied, barefaced, hand to God, multiple times, and then lied about lying. I'm just shocked and astounded that not only did he tell the lies to begin with, but he continues to perpetuate that he never lied. How many times is it acceptable for someone to be incarcerated and not brought to court? One time maybe is a mistake. 2 times maybe is a mistake. How about 8 times someone who is detained in your facility is refused to be brought for their day in court? Is that a mistake? Is that an accident? Or is that on purpose? Judge Irving, you own the practice of Irving and Irving, do you not? Or you benefit financially from this, yes? How is it that your court-appointed attorney, Taylor Sanders, who is assigned as the public defender to represent this case, resigns 2 days before a trial in January, and yet last week you sit on the bench to hear this case? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's not a conflict of interest. Maybe you're all in good faith doing exactly what you should be doing. Maybe I'm the wrong person. Maybe I shouldn't question why an individual's due process and legal rights have been trampled over when they have been refused to be brought to court 8 different times. 8. Count them out. That is a court date that should have been held in October of last year has still not been set because they refused to bring this individual to court, and they postpone it another month, another 2 months, another 3 months. Court dates now extend to a year from the time this individual was detained on 2 misdemeanor probation violations. And I think I mentioned that this individual has severe mental health issues, which led to why this violation occurred. And we don't take into consideration somebody's mental health. This individual has been court ordered to take medication. Guess how much medication has been administered to this individual while they have been incarcerated since August of last year? 0 medications. Your court, you order it, yet you don't even follow your own orders. So how do you expect people to be prepared for being on the outside when A, you've held them this ridiculously long period of time, your conflict of interest, your withdrawing from someone's case on a baseless purpose that Judge Coleman even questioned Taylor Sanders as to why she was withdrawing her representation of this case. And I'm going to read you the entire correspondence of that here in just a second, and let you decide whether you think it's a legitimate reason for her to withdraw services, or if this is collusion, conspiracy on behalf of these attorneys and this court to continue to hold someone in jail as the judge and jury without giving them their day in court, their due process. You can decide. Before I get that far, I want to bring you up to date on Garrett Jagtiani. Garrett Jagtiani tried to make it in private practice before he became a Commonwealth attorney. internet's a big, big world. It's hard to outrun some Google reviews on there. Garrett Franklin Jagtiani, he was a family attorney in Falls Church, Virginia. This was written by Phelan Christopher, who hired this attorney. Incompetent, terrible. That's what the co-line says. If I could give no star, I would. As a woman who suffered domestic violence with 4 children, with whom 2 are special needs, at the hands of my soon-to-be ex-husband, I sought an attorney who would care to fight for me and my children throughout my contentious divorce case. Pilar, which is his partner, was referred to me, so I contacted, consulted, and hired her to represent me. Not only was she unprofessional, not responding to calls, emails, but Pilar, without my permission, turned my case over to Garrett Jagtiani, who is incompetent. My pending light hearing in October of 2021 was continued because he forgot to serve my soon-to-be ex-husband. Who forgets to serve divorce papers and realizes a week before trial? I've contacted Pilar numerous times, and I did not want Garrett Jagtiani handling my case anymore after this major ball drop. Pilar continued to ignore me and allowed Garrett to screw up my case. The pendente light hearing was rescheduled to December 3rd, 2021, giving my ex-husband the opportunity to hide assets. Once we got to the December 3rd, 2021, opposite counsel asked the case not to be heard because Garrett failed to respond to their offer with a counteroffer. Another major ball drop by Garrett. The judge granted the request to opposite counsel, and then I was rescheduled to the 17th of December, 2021. The worst part, my husband was not served with discovery, nor did they draft one prior to the hearing. My ex-abuser, who has a law degree, took this as an opportunity to lie about losing contracts from his business and got away about lying about not having income. Let me just bring something to your attention here. In case you missed the last sentence, her ex-husband abuser has a law degree. Do you think that this was accident? That Garrett Jagtiani was colluding and conspiring against this woman? I don't think it's an accident. My public opinion says Garrett Jagtiani has been guilty of collusion and conspiracy for at least the last 4 or 5 years, as noted by this woman's testimony on a public forum. So what changes the situation today when Garrett Jagtiani continues to collude and to conspire against individuals at the public's expense? When will we have had enough? Well, I'm here to tell you today, I've had enough. I'm personally going to campaign against this administration. I'm going to put my personal money towards advertising against them, bringing these dark secrets to light, standing up for the individuals who have been hurt so badly by them. I'm not here to determine whether someone is guilty or innocent. I'm here to stand up for what is a basic human right. What is our constitutional rights? What are we entitled to as a community, as a whole? How do we turn a blind eye and allow people to continue to hurt other people and not step up to the plate and do something to help those who are the weak, the timid, the sick, the hurting? If you choose to read the rest of this, you can certainly Google Garrett Jagtiani's name, and this is one of the first 5 documents that pull up under his name. So feel free to read the whole description this woman made. Apparently she reported him to the Bar Association, but if anybody has ever utilized the Bar Association in the past, you realize that they don't work for the people either. They work for themselves, and they are very interested in protecting those with law degrees. Their interests do not lie. And one of the caveats that brought me here today to speak on behalf of Mustafa Al-Jazari, after meeting his family and reading about his story and hearing about the things that had transpired, was the fact that in all of my years, which I spent 15 years in this community practicing emergency medicine, I had never encountered a time where someone said that they had been sexually assaulted and were denied an exam to appropriate what exactly had happened. I'm going to say that one more time. In multiple hospitals serving this community, I have never heard of any time in my career someone claiming sexual assault and not being given a sexual assault exam by a specialized nurse dedicated to forensic data collection. Not one time have I ever heard that. Even in the most ridiculous or what we thought might not have even really been a sexual assault, we still did exams on these people. What I can't understand on multiple aspects is, one, take into consideration what it takes for a man to come forward and tell openly that he has been sexually assaulted by another man. Think about that for just a second. Someone who is very heterosexual, someone who has already had every ounce of their dignity and demeanor stripped from them, one shred at a time. How hard do you think it is for a man to come forward and say, another man sexually assaulted me? I can't imagine it. I don't know that I would be able to come forward and tell the public that that's happened. Let's talk about the psychology of the individual who inflicts this type of pain on another person. So we touched on the fact that most of the time these types of sexual assaults are never reported because of the humiliation and the embarrassment that they carry. The psychology of the individual inflicting this type of assault on someone is not an act of sexual gratification. It's an act of power, humiliation, and dehumanization. Studies of castration revealed that a rapist would then use objects to inflict the act on others. Broomsticks, other phallic-like objects they would use to penetrate another human being to, again, inflict humiliation, an act of power, and dehumanization. It's not a sexual gratification. So let's take that completely off the table. So is that what they accomplished here? Is that what your correctional officers accomplished? Did you dehumanize Mustafa Al-Jazari? Because I'm pretty sure that's exactly what you did. That was your intention, and you completed it. Did you humiliate him? Did you show him who was in power? Did you show him who the real boss was? Because I think that's what you intended to do. The fact that he was denied a SANE exam is unbelievable to me. In fact, I can't even think of words that are foul enough for me to describe the fact that he was denied an exam. It could have exonerated your correctional officer had you permitted a SANE exam to take place. But no, you denied it because you know he's guilty. Let's put this in another perspective. Something that everybody can relate to. What if you were arrested for a DUI, driving while under the influence of alcohol, and you refuse to take a breathalyzer test? What happens to you? You're found guilty of driving under the influence, regardless of whether you were or you were not. So under this same law, why isn't it applicable when someone says that they have been sexually assaulted by someone and denied access to the exam that would prove or disprove it, that this individual is not dragged out of this facility in handcuffs and held until it's proven or disproven otherwise that he did or did not perform this sexual assault on this prisoner. I can't honestly think of anything that's more disgusting than for someone in a position of power to inflict this type of pain and suffering on another human being. Let me just explain a little bit more psychology to you here about what likely happened in this event, because it probably wasn't a single individual involved in the sexual assault. This was probably what they call a blitz approach, where there's probably more than one individual liable for helping the one perpetrator to inflict this assault on another person. This is when you have a group of people that come together to restrain and disarm or stop the defense mechanisms of the victim. And I would like everybody to just take a second and consider what Mustafa must have been feeling, held down and assaulted in that manner by not just one person, but multiple people, because it would take multiple people to inflict that act. They didn't act alone, and they're not acting alone now. What's happening now is the grandest scheme of cover-up that you've ever witnessed in Prince William County happen. The criminals are protected by the criminals that we've elected into office. And I can't stand by and allow that to happen anymore. I have a long list of people here that I think need to be called to the table. Let's talk about the Board of Health Professions. They are here to protect our community in Richmond, Virginia. They're very quick to investigate healthcare providers for the most minuscule of complaints that are made. In fact, you can go onto the Board of Health Professions yourself and read the various reports of health providers, as these are all public records, and see what some of the complaints are. And just so you know, these are complaints that are founded, that you'll be reading about. These are the ones that healthcare providers carry on their public record for the rest of their careers. So somebody makes a complaint about them, the board does an investigation, and whether they're guilty or not guilty, oftentimes they carry this record with them for the rest of their career, which affects their ability to credential with insurance companies and participate to provide care for patients in the future. My understanding is that this family has filed a report with the Board of Health Professions here in the state of Virginia. I can't understand how the Board of Health Professions has turned a blind eye to somebody saying that they were sexually assaulted and did not receive an appropriate exam. The medical license of these providers and this facility should be burned, publicly burned, ripped off their walls and set on fire. You stand in between a patient and care, knowing altruistically you are doing the wrong thing. How dare you? As a healthcare provider, you represent all of us as a healthcare provider. And how dare you take on such responsibility that you're willing to put your license on the line to hide criminals behind what you're doing. The Board of Health Professions, you need to step to the plate. It is time that you do your job, which is to protect the public from dangerous healthcare providers. These are dangerous healthcare providers. If you permit a sexual assault to occur and you do not implement correct treatment, it is just as bad as if you committed that assault yourself. Let's talk about the assailants. Everyone knows a narcissist, don't you? You've met them. They're very grand. They think very highly of themselves, often complimenting themselves, often saying how wonderful they are, so that you also believe how wonderful they are. You know the type. Very charismatic. They never come off as the bad guy. Typically, 28% of male-on-male sexual assault victims come forward. 28%. That means 72% of the men who are sexually assaulted have never reported the occurrence. What happens to the victim? We forget about that. We forget about what happens to the victim. What's the recourse for them? You can't undo the act. No amount of criminal charges or health professionals being held accountable or political dignitaries losing their positions can undo the act that has happened. Most of these people commit suicide. That's the raw facts. That is the sad, hardcore truth to what happens. I'm sorry, that's unacceptable on so many levels. If they don't, it's a lifetime of PTSD, depression, and poor functioning and adaptation to society. Here in our community, not only are we facing a plight of drugs that have descended on our community, for which I have a lot of questions. I have a lot of questions as to how fentanyl was non-existent 3 years ago and is now being handled by common folks in middle schools around our counties. They talk about it like they have doctorate degrees in pharmaceuticals, like they understand it. They're unafraid of it. How does it become common vernacular in our communities? I can tell you, there's a huge amount of mental health conditions that are running under the radar. They're untreated. There's poor access to care. If you tried to find a psychiatrist here in this area, it's a 6+ month waiting time. A therapist, it's almost impossible to find a therapist, let alone a fantastic therapist. Someone that you can communicate well with, that you trust, that functions similarly in a way that you can relate to, which is individually based, of course. So we have these lack of resources. We have these growing mental health issues. So what's behind all these mental health issues? A lot of it has to do with our economy and where we are currently in our political state. Everything is 40% more expensive now than it was 3 years ago. I'm sure Amy Ashworth doesn't want to take responsibility for that, but she has had no problems taking raises or asking for more money for her budget, despite the economical demise that everybody else is experiencing. It starts with you. Every individual in this community has a voice. You need to exercise that voice. You need to come forward. Tell your stories. This is not the only time this is not isolated events that Amy Ashworth's employees have colluded and conspired against community members. So now it's time for everyone to come forward, say their piece, and let's stand together as a community, as a group, and let's evacuate this office of this horrible debacle that has come to be. We deserve better as a community. Our citizens deserve better. Our detainees deserve a safe place to be detained, awaiting their charges, whether they're guilty or not found guilty. There's a due process that people are entitled to that is being completely ignored. On top of the collusion and conspiracy that I just can't say enough, because it's time that this stops. We cannot continue to allow this to go on any longer. I implore all of you, please exercise your right to vote. Exercise your right to protest. Come and stand together with this family and help us defeat these monsters in our community. We are not going to allow them to continue to hurt our family members, our community members, or anyone that we care about any longer. It's finished. Amy Ashworth, you're finished here.